This play obviously is about fundamentalism, about religion, sex, government, justice, hypocrisy, marriage, absurdity. Sounds like today. It is a debate about absolutism and tolerance, about punishment and forgiveness, about liberty and restraint. And I don't think you have to look very far to see a parallel for Isabella's Mercy. I think of Nelson Mandela. And you don't have to look very far to see the kind of hypocrisy that Angelo is involved in. And you don't have to look very far to see where there's draconian punishment. When you read about capital punishment in Texas or Guantanamo, we think that there needs to be restraint. At least I do. There's probably too much liberty on Wall Street. And there's probably too much liberty with the drug trade and guns and child pornography. So we probably do want government to say enough. And the second word of this play is government. And it is a political play. It's a play of ideas. And Shakespeare lets all these things clash in this play. It's his last comedy. All these characters, which I think is really interesting, struggle with how to make sense of their situation and assert their own points of view. And it is a play that I think we will find will make the audience uncomfortable because it doesn't provide any easy answer. And Shaw loved Measure for Measure. And Bertolt Brecht said about Shaw, Shaw's doctrine is that if anyone is to express themselves freely, they first of all have to overcome a certain inborn fear of being conceited. It was clear to Shaw that any decent man's working equipment had to include that vital piece of apparatus, his own trumpet. Shaw's a terrorist. His brand of terror is an extraordinary one. He uses an extraordinary weapon, that of humor. This is a very funny play. And I think that humor comes from intelligence and obviously seeing what's wrong and what doesn't fit, and the characters are very outspoken.
So, Measure for Measure. We're creating a classical contemporary version of Shakespeare's Vienna, which preserves all of the values within the play, and that's really important to me. A theatrical world, an imagined world, not a literal world. Things are out of balance. And it is out of that situation that I think we are confronted with the essential question of the play, which, the question which I think sets everyone in motion, a question which many characters ask throughout the course of the play, which is there no remedy? The play is a thriller. Time is ticking. It's also a journey play. The Duke and other characters, they go to places that they've never been. They go to scary places and sacred places and profane places. I think the play is also about antithesis, which comes from the Greek word meaning opposition, or literally a placing against. These ideas about antithesis are in the design that we've created. We want to really see the contrasts between worlds. We want to see contrasts between religious and secular, between old and new, between sacred and profane. And it's important to embrace both of these seemingly antithetical sides of the play in order to unlock its meaning. And there are these strange sort of paradoxes that in the play that are sort of based on antithesis, like in order to discover the truth, one has to tell lies, or in order to become oneself, one has to become another person, or the greatest injustices are carried out by the justice system. So I've been reading about this play,
We've made this design that is possibly the most classical looking design I have made, the most old design I've made in years to make a modern world. And I think it's that discrepancy, that old things hang around, that is interesting. Old ideas, old forms of government. And to get at the notion that the struggle right now is against the civic laws. The government that is in place here needs fixing. We needed to put the architecture of government on stage. So we have mostly palace architecture on stage. Part of where this came from was me and Aaron looking at a photo of a cathedral in Vienna, a 15th century cathedral, and looking at the people in the day-glow clothing in front of it, in their fanny packs and their shorts and their day-glow sneakers. It's these things that hang around and are friction with them that feels like the essential dichotomy to me in the scenery. The objects, the handheld objects, the things the people, the 21st century people deal with, the 20th, 21st century-ish people deal with, will be modern objects. We're looking for objects that just stand the test of time.
What I'm interested in is this idea of Act 5 being a pivot in this world. You know, Peter talked a lot about the old traveling forward. We've talked about old government structures. Everything in this play sort of comes to 5 and then turns. One of the things that came out of Aaron's work in prison was that the prison in this play is actually the brightest place. So using that and sort of reverse engineering what the light is for the play, I'm interested in that the violence of shadow and the richness of darkness in this world being exposed by the pivotal events of Act 5 and simply put, by illumination, by sort of the presence of sunlight. So in a way, our world outside of the prison is defined by places where there's very, very dark backgrounds, where there's a strong presence of source and a strong presence of shadow. It's going to be a dialogue of how do we make those ideas articulate themselves and still make sure that the lighting design isn't hitting the play on the head with a 2x4.
Yeah, August Sander was a German photographer who did at the turn and early parts of the 20th century decided he was going to kind of classify all of German society in photographs. And what's nice actually and instructive about that book is that it's you know, what you take away from the book are their faces. So in a way, I feel like we've done all this work to sort of step back and let people look at your beautiful faces. It is contemporary-ish. My aim is a little weirder, which is that it does, I'm maybe making too much of it, but it wants to feel a little bit remembered, a little bit removed from today, in a way that I don't want anybody to be able to put their finger on. And
it's really tricky when you think about when you're trying to define a music scape that defies period. So that blending of old instruments with new instruments, old scales and melodic tones with new rhythms and textures. So those are the kind of things that we've been talking about in terms of the music. We're dealing with finding those contrasts and and I'm thinking a lot about texture, the texture of reeds with like an accordion or a saxophone contrasted with regal horns, the halls of justice, and big timpanis contrast with dissonant tones on a hammered dulcimer. So those are some of the ideas of texture.
But something that Mark has said, that the violence of light and shadow, in a way, I think we're trying to do in terms of the violence of these different areas that you guys are going to, specifically outside and inside. When we transition to outside, we have a blast of that outside craziness that you're trying to get away from. You know, and I think also that same thing going to prison, a blast of the unpleasantness of that world. We're trying to figure out this world that doesn't do the cell phone or the computer, but does say now, does, you know, sort of, that's what, especially for a prison and outside, and potentially including people in that outside when we were addressing a huge gathering. So that's sort of where we are sound-wise.